Joe Biden signs executive order to block U.S. investment in high tech in China and Hong Kong. The MTR saw a sharp rebound in passengers. Huge fire in Hawaii is getting out of control. Hello and welcome to TVB News. U.S. President Joe Biden has signed an executive order to block and regulate high-tech American-based investments in China. That also includes Hong Kong, with lawmakers and businesses expressing concern about the local tech sector's future development. The move comes despite the White House having repeatedly stated that it has no interest in decoupling from Beijing. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce said the executive order seriously deviates from the market economy and fair competition principle. Daniel Rao tells us more.
Designating China as a country of concern, the executive order aims to limit U.S. investments in 3 categories of national security technologies. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, these include semiconductors and microelectronics, quantum information technologies, and certain artificial intelligence systems. The order also requires U.S. venture capitalists and other investors to notify the Treasury of prospective investment into Chinese companies for developing technologies in the targeted sectors. U.S. officials said the order seeks to blunt China's ability to use American investments in its technology companies to upgrade its military. That's in addition to preserving broader levels of trade that are vital for both nations' economies, while complementing the export controls on advanced computer chips implemented by Washington last year that led to pushback by Chinese officials. The latest executive order is expected to come into effect following a 45-day comment period. U.S. companies can present their views to the U.S. government within that time. An American State Department spokesman said the decision was taken by U.S. President Joe Biden's administration amid national security concerns. Spokesman Matthew Miller outlined the White House is looking to continue open dialogue with China to ensure bilateral ties don't deteriorate further.
We have made clear to them repeatedly in all of our engagements with them is that we will continue to say things and we will continue to do things. And by do things, I mean taking policy actions that they object to. But we will do that because we believe it is in the national security interest of the United States.
Daniel Rao, TVB News.
Beijing has voiced firm opposition to the U.S. restrictions on involvement in the country. Locally, tech startups are worried the latest restriction will affect funding. Sharon Tang reports.
Following the announcement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry called the move from the U.S. a blatant economic coercion and tech bullying, and an act that seriously violates the principles of market economy and fair competition. The ministry also asked the U.S. to follow through on President Joe Biden's commitment not to seek decoupling from China, immediately cancel the wrong decisions, and stop weaponizing tech and trade issues. Beijing's Ministry of Commerce added the move undermines the international economic and trade order and seriously disrupts the security of global industrial and supply chains. In Hong Kong, lawmakers think the direct impact on startups is limited, but it's important to focus on how to raise funds to support tech firms.
Many tech companies will leverage AI in some sort, particularly on AI and semiconductor. The changing of position of the funds will impact on the early stage investment scene in China and also Hong Kong, Macau, because a lot of these companies they rely on early stage investments. We need to come into a discussion of how to attract or support local funds, encourage more local funds or government seeded funds, and also mainland capital coming to Hong Kong.
TVB also spoke to an AI company that was founded in the city 3 years ago. The founder is worried that overseas trading partners will avoid doing businesses with Hong Kong companies. The American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong noted members will be seeking to present their views to the U.S. government on the scope of the American restrictions as well as their impact on business. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The MTR Corporation posted a net profit of $4.2 billion in the first half of this year. That's more than 10% less than the same period last year. MTR profits from property development tumbled more than 90%. Jackie Lin reports.
Riding through the pandemic, the MTR Corporation saw a market rebound in rail ridership, especially after Hong Kong reopened its borders, having returned to 90% of pre-pandemic levels. During the same period last year, the MTRC posted a net loss of more than $2.7 billion in operating income from transport services. This year, it plunged to $774 million. Profits from station commercials went above $1.7 billion, while rental businesses and management sat at nearly $2 billion. But profits from property development plummeted 90%, now $712 million. The rail giant explains the market plunge in property development profits was due to the large base number from last year's earnings in 3 property projects, and it is cautiously optimistic about this year's annual profits from transport operations.
We remain optimistic. We are seeing a good trend. However, the patronage depends very much on economy situation, both in Hong Kong and elsewhere, as well as the traveling behavior of our customers.
High-speed rail ridership surpassed pre-pandemic levels, while airport express patronage returned to around 60 to 70% of pre-COVID figures. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
National Security Police have arrested 10 people who are allegedly related to the now-defunct 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, a fund set up during the 2019 anti-government protests to provide legal assistance to activists. Police say there may be more arrests. Memo Sengai reports.
On Thursday afternoon, National Security Police brought an arrestee, Bobo Ip, a former employee of the Secretariat of the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, to a bookshop where she worked for investigation. The city's National Security Police arrested 4 men and 6 women today, aged between 26 and 43. The 10 were suspected of conspiracy to collude with a foreign country or with external elements to endanger national security and inciting riots. Police had warrants to search the residences and offices of those arrested, where some documents and electronic communication devices were seized. According to the police, the arrested people were suspected of conspiracy to collude with the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, receiving donations from overseas associations to help people who have fled overseas or organizations that called for sanctions against the SAR. Sources said members of a Chinese medicine practitioners organization, which provided medical treatments to protesters during the protests, are among the arrested people. Sources also said some members of the organization admitted that they were frontline protesters and had received money from the 612 fund. 612 was established in June 2019, aiming to provide humanitarian, medical, psychological, and emergency financial assistance to injured or arrested protesters. The fund ceased operation in 2021. The 5 former trustees of the fund, including local singer Denise Ho, former legislator Margaret Ng, and Cardinal Joseph Tsang, were arrested for allegedly colluding with foreign forces in May 2022. They were later released on bail. In November last year, the trustees were arrested over failing to register the fund as a society. They were found guilty and fined between $2,500 and $4,000 each. Memo Senai, TVB News.
The acting consul general of Indonesia told Secretary for Labor and Welfare Chris Sun there will be no change to the fee structure for domestic workers coming to Hong Kong. The clarification comes after the SAR government protested about an earlier report from Indonesia that Hong Kong employers would have to shoulder the bulk of agency fees. That information was released by the Indonesian Manpower Placement Agency Association last week. The Consul General told Sun that organization does not represent the Indonesian government. Both the Indonesian representative and the SAR government said they would continue discussions. Sun is also in talks with other places, including Bangladesh and Cambodia, to widen the sources of foreign maids in Hong Kong. In Hawaii, at least 36 people are dead and a historic town almost completely destroyed after wildfires tore through the island of Maui. Lahaina in West Maui is smoldering as hundreds of buildings there have been burnt to the ground and residents displaced. David Garrett reports.
Lahaina alight on fire. It's almost an apocalyptic vision. These pictures from a drone show uncontrollable blazes in multiple locations. Hurricane Dora and low humidity whipped up wildfires. The historic tourist town is reportedly almost completely wiped out as fires roared throughout the night and into the day. Earlier, people had begun evacuating. The fire quickly started ripping through one of the main streets. The speed was devastating. People looked on in disbelief before realising they had to leave. The Coast Guard said they rescued a dozen people who jumped into the ocean to escape the flames. Politicians told people to get out and stay out.
We never anticipated in this state that a hurricane, which did not make impact on our islands, will cause this type of wildfires. Wildfires that wiped out communities.
Others were able to escape on boats, leaving Lahaina smouldering behind them, smoke billowing into the sky. Later, helicopters went up to survey the damage.
Unbelievable. This looks like Baghdad or something.
We expected to see some structures burned and so forth and some damage, but we were not prepared for what we saw. What we saw looked like an area that had been bombed and burned in a war zone. It was unbelievable.
Oh my gosh, look at the harbor.
Richie, a pilot for 50 years, said he'd never seen anything like it. Front streets, restaurants and shops decimated. Boats in the harbour destroyed.
Oh my gosh.
We were looking at each other in disbelief because we couldn't believe that what we were seeing was real. It just looked like something from a movie.
Thousands are without power across Hawaii. Cell phone coverage was so bad people couldn't make the 911 emergency call. The town of 12,000 people saw its hospitals overwhelmed. People suffered burns and smoke inhalation. Satellite images of Maui show a widespread scene of disaster. Thousands of acres were burned. Away from Lahaina, a house is filmed burning to rubble.
This was a home. There's their car.
The human cost of this natural disaster is still being evaluated. David Garrett, TVB News.
Still ahead, government wants to toughen up punishment for noise pollution from loud hailers. FBI killed a man who reportedly claimed he wants to kill Joe Biden. Tropical storm Kanon hits South Korea. Welcome back. Authorities proposed amending the noise control ordinance, prohibiting shops to use a loud hailer in public places, as well as introducing a fixed penalty. A 2-month consultation begins today. The retail sector thinks the blanket ban is not feasible at all. Sharon Tang reports.
Are these adverts used by shops on these busy streets a public nuisance? This resident who lives in Shamsho-po said quality products attract customers, not how many speakers are used for promotion. But these sights and sounds may soon be gone. That's because the Environmental Protection Department wants to cut noise pollution. That would include banning shops and hawkers using a loud hailer or playing pre-recorded announcements on speakers. Still, the playing of music or announcing seat numbers will not be regulated. Over the past 5 years, noise polluters have been slapped with 176 violations with an average fine of no more than $5,000. But now authorities want to introduce tougher fixed penalties of $10,000. In Shamsho-po, almost every other shop was trying to attract trade using speakers. This vendor said, actually, we weren't very loud. The point for us is customers need to be able to hear it. Others say it's hard to say if the proposed crackdown would affect their income, but without the help of a loud hailer, no one will hear what she says. Retail sector lawmaker Shiu Ka-fai disagrees with a blanket ban on all shops. He took the annual Brands and Products Expo as an example. He said the stalls are surrounded by at least 40 people at the same time. How are vendors supposed to promote their products if they are not allowed to use speakers? He added business sentiment is supported by crowds and the government's move is certainly not helping with economic development. The consultation period will run until October the 8th with the target of implementing the new laws set in early 2025. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
With the city living in regular high temperatures this summer, the government's evaluation measures for heat stress for outdoor workers has drawn mixed reviews. An organization suggests the government adopt an internationally used method, wet bulb globe temperature, to measure labor heat stress.
The WBGT is a standard method used internationally to evaluate or assess the risk of heat stress on health effects of outdoor workers, of workers in general. Okay, but the Hong Kong Health Index, developed by the Hong Kong Observatory with the Chinese University of Hong Kong, was developed to reflect the risk of the general population having health conditions that require admission through the emergency departments.
The organization hopes authorities can review and formulate the heat stroke prevention measures to make them more tailored to the labor working environments. Overseas in the U.S., FBI agents shot and killed an armed man in Utah accused of making violent threats against President Joe Biden. It happened hours before the president landed in the state on Wednesday. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, President Biden out west heading to Salt Lake City just hours after the FBI says its agents had a deadly confrontation with a man who had threatened to kill him. The FBI says it happened at 6:15 this morning in nearby Provo, Utah, where they were serving an arrest warrant on suspect Craig Robertson, who they say was approximately 70 to 75 years old.
There was a big boom, and then there was another one and another one.
In court documents, the FBI says Robertson posted on social media, "I hear Biden is coming to Utah," and that he was cleaning the dust off his sniper rifle. This Robertson post, according to the FBI, shows a picture of his weapons along with threats ahead of the 2024 election cycle. The documents also say Robertson posted threats to kill Vice President Kamala Harris and the Democratic DA in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, who's now prosecuting former President Trump. During surveillance in March, the FBI says it observed Robertson wearing a hat bearing the word Trump. And when agents attempted to speak with him, Robertson replied, "I said it was a dream," adding, "Don't return without a warrant."
He was nice to me. It just goes to show you never know who your neighbors are.
It comes amid growing concerns over threats to public officials and their families. Capitol Police saying the number of investigations is historically high. Major incidents include the violent attack on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul, and an attempted assassination of conservative Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
In Ecuador, a presidential candidate known for speaking up against corruption has been shot and killed at a political rally in Quito. Fernando Villavicencio was speaking at an event in the capital. He was killed as he left the venue with as many as 30 shots fired. China has condemned the attack and expressed condolences over his assassination, which came 2 weeks before the election. Villavicencio, 59, was not expected to win, but he spoke out against corruption and organized crime. The criminal gang Los Lobos, which has 8,000 members, has claimed responsibility for the killing. The nation has declared 3 days of national mourning and has mobilized the army to beef up security. In South Korea, Typhoon Kanon made landfall this morning, dumping heavy rain and pummeling the country's southern regions. Thousands of people had to be evacuated. Tracy Furness has more.
Tropical storm Kanon made landfall on the Korean peninsula Thursday morning, bringing with it intense rain to Busan, Jeju Island and other southern coastal regions. As of 8:30 a.m., Kanon was packing maximum winds of 126 kilometers an hour while moving at a speed of 22 kilometers an hour. More than 30 centimeters of rain had fallen in the southern areas during the morning. Around 10,000 people, mostly in coastal areas, were forced to evacuate their homes, and the number was expected to grow as heavy rains continue while rivers and streams rise. Wind and rain toppled trees, ripped off roofs and turned roads into rivers. Emergency workers were responding to growing reports of flooding and landslides by afternoon as the storm advanced north towards major urban centres near the capital, Seoul. The Korean Meteorological Administration said Kanon will move slowly through the Korean peninsula with its eyes brushing Seoul. The storm will weaken by the time it moves to North Korea early Friday, but the greater Seoul area will feel the impact until Friday afternoon. Typhoon Kanon comes just weeks after the country's central and southern regions were pounded by torrential rain that triggered flash floods and landslides that killed at least 47 people. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
On the mainland, Jilin and Heilongjiang provinces are under pressure to fight floods. This as recent floods in the Songhua River basin in northeast China have caused 85 rivers to exceed their warning levels. But a flood control plan has been successful. The local government sent agriculture experts to help villagers rescue their crops. And floods caused embankment erosions, riverbed erosion, and roads to collapse in many places along the Binsui Railway. The National Railway Harbin Bureau has launched a flood control plan with 4,600 emergency personnel carrying out repairs on railway lines and equipment. After 4 days and nights, 24 sections of the Binsu Railway were cleared and the line is open to traffic. China has lifted COVID-era bans on outbound tour groups to 78 countries and regions starting today. They include the U.S., UK, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and European countries. This is the third batch of countries local tour operators could organize group tours to visit. So far, the mainland allows tour groups to visit around 140 countries and regions. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.